The Innocent He Broke, written and narrated by Moonbeam Audiobook. If you are new here, please consider subscribing. Chapter 1. Hana. The label on the champagne was a whisper of gold, the vintage worth more than my entire apartment. I poured it with a hand that did not shake, the pale, bubbling liquid a perfect measured stream into the crystal flute. My smile, the one I had spent 10 years perfecting, was just as measured. It was a masterpiece of beautiful, expensive lies. Hina-chan, you have the hands of an artist. Morita-san, a bloated politician with a wandering gaze, murmured beside me. His hand was, predictably, on my knee. You are too kind, Morita-san, I replied, my voice a soft, silken purr. It was the voice of Hina, the top hostess at Kitsune's Kiss, Tokyo's most exclusive, most secret garden of earthly delights. Hina, the untouchable doll. I let his hand rest for 3 seconds, long enough to feed his ego, before I shifted, my body moving with the fluid grace of a dancer. But a true artist must not be distracted. I placed the flute in his hand, my fingers brushing his. A tiny, calculated spark. He chuckled, preening, and his hand retreated. This was my world. A neon-drenched cage of shimmering silks, the air thick with the scent of imported perfume, overpriced whiskey, and the metallic tang of male desperation. The other girls, the butterflies of the kiss, flitted and laughed, their voices a high, bright symphony. I was not a butterfly. I was the spider, sitting in a web of my own design, waiting. I smiled, I poured, I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. And with every glass, every fawning compliment, the cold, hard thing in my chest grew a little colder, a little harder. This place was a means to an end. Every yen I saved, every secret I overheard, was a stepping stone. This smile, this body, this carefully crafted persona of Hina, it was all a weapon I was sharpening for a single purpose, for revenge. And then the air changed. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling. A sudden crushing drop in atmospheric pressure. The music, a languid, jazzy lounge track, didn't stop, but it seemed to thin. The chorus of fake laughter faltered, dying in 100 throats. I felt the shift on my skin, a cold draft that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. My back was to the entrance, but I didn't need to see. I watched Morita-san's face. The ruddy, self-satisfied flush drained, leaving a pasty, grayish white. His eyes, which had been greedily fixed on my neckline, snapped to the door, wide with a sudden, primal fear. "Mama-san," one of the new girls whispered, her voice trembling. I turned my head slowly. My smile was still in place. It was my armor. Mama-san, the iron-willed proprietor of the Kiss, was a dragon in a bespoke kimono. She bowed to no man. But now, she was bowing. Her head was so low it was almost reverent, her entire body a taut line of submission. She was leading a man, or perhaps a force of nature. He was tall, broad, and encased in a suit of such exquisite dark tailoring that it seemed to drink the club's ambient light. His men, 2 of them, flanked the entrance, their presence sucking all the joy and frivolity from the room, leaving only a cold, hard vacuum. They were statues, but the bulges under their jackets were unmistakable. The man himself walked with a liquid, predatory grace. He was older than the man from my nightmares, but no less terrifying. His black hair was slicked back, revealing harsh, aristocratic features. A sharp jaw, a straight nose, and eyes that were bored, utterly, lethally bored. That boredom was the most dangerous thing in the room. Mama-san stopped at the center of the club, her voice, usually a commanding instrument, now laced with a honeyed deference. "A pleasure, as always, Tanaka-sama. We are honored." My blood didn't just run cold. It stopped. It turned to ice, freezing my veins, stopping my breath, halting my heart in my chest. Tanaka. Mama-san was gliding toward my table. Toward me. Hina, she said, her voice smooth, but I could hear the steel underneath. Do not fail me. Our most important guest has requested you. I stood. The movement was automatic. My limbs felt distant, puppets on a string. I turned. I faced him. 10 years. 10 years I had stared at his face, first in newspapers, then on grainy website photos. The man who, on a whim, on a single test of his power, had signed the order. A red stamp on a piece of paper that had systematically, cruelly, and efficiently annihilated Inoue Textiles. My father's company. My father's life. I remembered the smell of his study, old paper, ink, and whiskey. I remembered the silence of the house. I remembered the thud from the floor above, the sound that had ended my childhood. And the man responsible, the architect of my ruin, was standing 10 feet away. Kenji, the Oni Tanaka, heir to the Tanaka-gumi. He looked at me. His gaze was heavy, a physical weight. It traveled from my immaculately pinned hair, over the curve of my collarbone in the deep blue kimono, down to my waist, and back up. It was not the lecherous, grasping look of men like Morita. It was the cool, detached assessment of a connoisseur examining a piece of art. Or perhaps, a side of beef. And he didn't recognize me. Of course he didn't. The girl he had destroyed was 15. She was all gangly limbs, high school uniforms, and a bright, naive smile. I had buried that girl. Hina was what grew on her grave. This realization, this insult was so profound that it burned away the ice. Under the frost, a furnace of pure, white-hot hatred roared to life. It was so potent I could taste it, like acid on my tongue. Tanaka-sama, Mama-san was saying, this is Hina, our brightest star. Kenji didn't even look at her. His eyes were locked on mine. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to his right. Mama-san turned to a cowering Morita. Morita-san, your evening is unfortunately concluded. But my tab... Morita stammered, a man caught between his fear and his wounded pride. A low, quiet rumble of a voice. Put his tab, the man said on mine. Morita was gone in seconds, scrambling away as if the hounds of hell were at his heels. Kenji Tanaka slid into the booth. He didn't sit. He occupied the space, claiming it as his own. He was the devil, and he hadn't even bothered to knock. I was still standing. My training screamed at me to sit, to smile, to pour. My soul screamed at me to take the champagne bottle in my hand and shatter it across his arrogant, handsome face. I did neither. I simply stood, my smile frozen, my eyes holding his. A flicker of something crossed his face. Not recognition. Annoyance? Number. It was intrigue. He was used to women falling at his feet. He was not used to them standing like statues, their smiles a porcelain mask of war. Sit, he commanded. It was not a request. I sat. The silk of my kimono rustled, the only sound in the bubble of silence that had formed around our table. I picked up the bottle. The same bottle I had poured for Morita. I would pour it for him. The irony was so bitter it was almost comedy. I reached for a clean flute. No. His hand, large and calloused, with a single heavy gold ring, closed over mine. His skin was hot, a brand against my own. The jolt was so unexpected, so powerful that I flinched. I had not been prepared for that. I had prepared for his cruelty, his arrogance, his violence. I had not prepared for the sizzling, terrifying energy that poured off him in waves. This wasn't just power. This was life, dark and supercharged. He didn't remove his hand. He just held mine. His thumb stroked the back of my hand, a lazy, possessive gesture. I am not interested, he said, his voice a low drawl, in Morita-san's leftovers. He released me, and I snatched my hand back as if it had been burned. He gestured to one of his men. The man stepped forward and placed a different bottle on the table. A dark, unmarked bottle. Sake. Heard of this? He asked, tapping the bottle. Kiyomizu's bane. They only make 10 bottles a year. They say the monks who brew it pray for a good death as they stir the rice. He was teasing me. Teasing me. This monster. I am not familiar with it, Tanaka-sama, I said. My voice was perfect. Calm. Silken. Of course you're not, he said, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. He poured 2 small cups himself. He pushed one toward me. Drink, he said. I looked at the cup. My mind raced. Was it poison? A test? You think I'm trying to poison you? He chuckled, as if he'd read my mind. He picked up the cup he'd poured for me, drank it himself in one swallow, and then refilled it from his own. There. Now we're both safe. We're both dead. I had no choice. I was Hina, the hostess. I was his. I picked up the cup. I bowed my head slightly, and I drank. The sake was extraordinary. It tasted like cold mountain air, and fire, and something ancient. It burned a path straight to my stomach, warming me from the inside out, momentarily shocking the rage into submission. I set the cup down. Good, he said, watching my face. He leaned in, and the world shrank to just him. The scent of him, clean, expensive soap, the faint metallic tang of iron, and that fiery sake. They talk about you, you know, he murmured, his voice dropping so low I had to strain to hear it. In rooms you'll never see. Hina, the untouchable doll. The sad, beautiful enigma. The only honest thing in this whole city of lies. He was too close. His presence was suffocating me. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. They say, he continued, that no one has ever seen you crack, that no one has ever seen the doll break. He leaned in even closer. His lips were an inch from my ear. I could feel his breath on my skin. The urge to ram my knee into his groin, to take the pin from my hair and drive it into his neck, was so strong I almost blacked out. Here's the thing, Hina-chan, he whispered, and his voice was a velvet-covered threat. I'm not a man who likes dolls. His eyes met mine, dark and endless. He smiled. And in that smile I saw the Oni. The demon. I'm a man who likes to see what makes them break. He leaned back, sipped his sake, and watched me, his eyes gleaming with a new, terrifying light. He didn't recognize me. He didn't know he was sitting across from the ghost of the girl he had already broken. He thought this was a game he was starting. He had no idea. I was the one who was going to finish it.
Chapter 2. Kenji. I hated this place. I hated the smell. A cloying, suffocating fog of Chanel number 5 spilled champagne and the faint, coppery tang of desperation. I hated the sound. A symphony of lies, all played in the same high, simpering key. The tinkle of ice in a glass. The rustle of a silk kimono. The forced, brittle laughter of women who were paid to find me charming. They did not find me charming. They found me terrifying. And that, at least, was honest. Your father's wisdom is, as always, beyond reproach, Tanaka-sama, Sasaki drawled, lifting his glass. He was the head of the rival Sasaki-gumi, a snake who fancied himself a dragon, and he was, at this moment, my primary burden. This goodwill meeting was my father's idea. Maintain the peace, Kenji, he had ordered, his voice like gravel. We do not need a war, yet. So here I sat, the Oni, the demon of the Tanaka-gumi, a man who had been trained to break bones before he was trained to shave, making small talk about shipping routes and police patrols. I was a warrior forced to be a diplomat. I would have preferred a sword in my hand. At least a sword didn't lie. My father is a man of tradition, I replied, my voice a bored counterpoint to his oily flattery. I signaled for more whiskey, my fourth. The liquor was overpriced and weak, but it was the only thing dulling the sharp, irritating edge of Sasaki's smile. To tradition, then, he said. I didn't drink. I was scanning the room, my boredom a physical ache. Polished glass. That's what these women were. Beautiful, empty, and designed to shatter. They fawned over Sasaki, giggling at his pathetic jokes, their eyes flicking to me, wide and assessing, trying to gauge if I was the kind of man who would tip well or the kind who would have them thrown in the bay. The answer was, on any given night, both or neither. My gaze drifted, landing on the politician, Morita. A pig. He was a useful pig, but a pig nonetheless. His hands already wandering onto the hostess beside him. Standard, boring. But then, I saw her. She wasn't one of the butterflies, flitting and desperate. She was still. She was serving the pig, but her grace wasn't fawning. It was controlled, almost predatory. Her smile was a weapon, a piece of immaculate, flawless armor, and under it, I saw a shadow. It wasn't just sadness. I saw sadness every day. It was the currency of this city. This was something different. It was a void. A profound, tragic, cold emptiness that looked so familiar. It was the same shadow I saw in my own mirror every morning. The hollow, aching guilt that I buried beneath the Oni reputation. The part of me that remembered the screams, the blood, the casual cruelty of my youth, and knew, deep down, that there was no goodwill. There was only power and the things you destroyed to get it. This woman, she was one of the destroyed, but she wasn't shattered. She had taken the broken pieces and forged them into a blade. I was not just attracted, I was intrigued. The boredom, the heavy, crushing weight of my life, evaporated. It was gone, replaced by a sudden, laser-focused need. Sasaki was still talking. I had no idea what he was saying. I held up a hand. He stopped, mid-syllable. The entire table went silent. Our business is concluded for the night, Sasaki-san, I said, my voice flat. It was a dismissal. The snake knew it. His eyes narrowed, but he saw the look on my face. He wasn't that foolish. He bowed, a sharp, angry dip of his head. Tanaka-sama, always a pleasure. He and his men were gone in 30 seconds. I stared at the woman across the room. I watched her handle Morita, a fluid, graceful shift that was both a submission and a rejection. A true artist. I beckoned to Mama-san. The dragon lady was at my side in an instant, her face a perfect mask of deference. Tanaka-sama? Is everything to your liking? I didn't look at her. I pointed. Her! Mama-san's smile didn't waver, but I saw the calculation in her eyes. Ah, Hina, our brightest star, an excellent choice, but she is currently engaged. She is not, I said. Not anymore. Mama-san was smart. She didn't argue. She glided away, a wraith in dark silk, and I watched the moment she spoke to the hostess. I watched Hina stand. I watched her turn. I saw her smile, that perfect porcelain armor, and for a fraction of a second, I saw it freeze. I saw the faintest tremor as she looked at me. There you are. It wasn't fear. I knew fear. I saw it every day. This was something else. Something raw. Something I wanted to taste. She came to me. She faced me. She was a goddess of ice, all polite bows and controlled grace. But her eyes were on fire. I dismissed Morita. The pig nearly tripped over himself in his haste to escape. I slid into the booth occupying the space and watched her. She was still standing, a beautiful statue of defiance. "Sit," I commanded. She held my gaze for a beat too long. A flicker of, what? Hatred? Good. Hatred was honest. She sat. The rustle of her kimono was the loudest sound I'd heard all night. She reached for the champagne, the same swill Morita had been drinking. Her hands were perfect. Not a shake, not a tremor. I wanted to change that. No. My hand covered hers. Her skin was cool, like marble, but under it I felt a jolt, a pulse. It was like grabbing a live wire. Her entire body flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. But I saw it. I felt it. I let my thumb stroke the back of her hand. A lazy, possessive circle. "I am not interested," I said, my voice a low drawl, "in Morita-san's leftovers." She snatched her hand back like she'd been burned. I almost smiled. "Tatsu!" I called. My second in command was at my shoulder, a dark, unmarked bottle in his hand, my personal stock. Kiyomizu's Bane. I placed it on the table. "Heard of this?" I asked, tapping the bottle. "Kiyomizu's Bane. They only make 10 bottles a year. They say the monks who brew it pray for a good death as they stir the rice." I was teasing her. I was pulling at the threads, trying to see which one would make her unravel. "I am not familiar with it, Tanaka-sama," she said. Her voice was silk, hollow. "Of course you're not." I poured 2 cups, pushed one toward her. "Drink." I saw it again. That flash of wariness. Her eyes flicked to the cup, then to me. She thought I was poisoning her. The thought was so absurd, so primal. It sent a jolt of something hot and dark through my veins. I laughed. A short, harsh sound. "You think I'm trying to poison you?" I picked up her cup, drank it in one swallow. The sake was a blade of cold fire down my throat. I refilled the cup from my own and pushed it back to her. "There. Now we're both safe. Or both dead." She watched me. Her eyes were a deep, dark, endless ocean. I wanted to drown in them. She picked up the cup. She drank. She didn't cough. She didn't waver. She just absorbed it. "Good," I said, my voice rough. I leaned in. The scent of her hit me. It wasn't the cloying perfume of the club. It was something clean, like jasmine, and steel. "They talk about you, you know," I murmured, my voice dropping. The club had faded away. There was only this table, only her. In rooms you'll never see. Hina, the untouchable doll, the sad, beautiful enigma, the only honest thing in this whole city of lies. I was too close. I knew it. I didn't care. I could feel the heat rolling off her skin. Or maybe it was mine. "They say," I continued, "that no one has ever seen you crack. That no one has ever seen the doll break." I leaned closer, my lips brushing the shell of her ear. I felt her shiver, a full-body tremor that she tried to suppress. I smiled. "Got you." "Here's the thing, Hina-chan," I whispered, and I let the velvet drop from my voice. letting the threat underneath come through. I'm not a man who likes dolls. Her eyes met mine. Dark, endless, furious. I'm a man who likes to see what makes them break. I leaned back, sipping my sake. I had expected fear. I had expected her to be impressed. I had expected something fawning. I got her, just watching me. Her beautiful face a mask, her eyes a raging inferno. She wasn't afraid, she was angry. And I, Kenji, the Oni Tanaka, had not felt this alive in a decade. I finished my sake. Tatsu was at the edge of the room, signaling. It was time. I stood. She stood with me, the perfect, graceful hostess. I wanted to push her back down. I wanted to shatter that composure. I dropped a stack of bills onto the table, enough to buy her apartment. A tip, I said. She didn't even look at it. I will see you tomorrow, Hina-chan, I said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. She just smiled. That cold, perfect porcelain smile. As you wish, Tanaka-sama. I walked out of the club, the heavy, perfumed air giving way to the cool Tokyo night. The adrenaline was still pumping, a hot, heavy pulse in my veins. I climbed into the back of my armored Lexus. Tatsu sat in the passenger seat. The meeting with Sasaki? Tatsu asked. He's a snake, I said, staring out the window, the neon signs a blur. But I wasn't seeing them. I was seeing her eyes. Sir? The hostess. Hina. Tatsu turned, his brow furrowed. He was my second, my shadow, the only man I trusted. He knew me. He knew I never mixed business with this. Buy out her night, I ordered, my voice quiet. Buy out her week. I don't care what it costs. Tatsu's eyes widened. Sir, is that wise? To show such interest? Do it. Yes, sir. He turned back, but I wasn't finished. And Tatsu? Sir? Find out everything. Her real name, where she's from, what put that shadow in her eyes. I want to know what she ate for breakfast this morning. Tatsu was silent for a long moment. A woman like that. Secrets are all she has. She could be dangerous. I don't like secrets, I growled, the image of her face burning in my mind. Unless they're mine. I leaned my head back against the leather. I needed to know. I needed to understand what or who had put that tragic fire in her eyes. And then, I needed to own it.
Chapter 3. Hana. My apartment was a single, Spartan room, one tatami mat for sleeping, a small hot plate, a tiny cracked mirror. It was a monk's cell, a place of quiet focus and deprivation. It was my sanctuary. And Kenji Tanaka had, without ever setting foot inside, desecrated it. His gifts covered the floor. They were not just gifts, they were an invasion, an occupation. The sterile, quiet air of my room was now choked with the opulent, suffocating scent of new leather, expensive perfume, and French-milled soap. A cascade of silk, a dress the color of a fresh bruise, was draped over my sleeping mat. Beside it, a handbag in buttery soft calfskin, its gold clasp gleaming like a predatory eye. There were shoes that had clearly been chosen to look delicate but felt as heavy as shackles. There were cosmetics, perfumes, lotions, an entire arsenal designed to paint the doll he wanted. And then there was the box. It was velvet, the color of dried blood. Inside, nestled on a bed of white satin, was a string of black pearls. They were enormous, perfectly round, and impossibly lustrous, glowing with a cold, malevolent light. They were the most beautiful, most hideous things I had ever seen. I touched one. It was cool, smooth, and heavy. The weight was a promise, a down payment. This was the price of a soul. I picked up the necklace. It felt like a collar. My collar. These were not gifts. They were blood money. They were the spoils of a war he'd won 10 years ago. A war I hadn't even known was being fought until the day my father died. My phone buzzed on the floor, a vicious, angry sound in the silence. It vibrated against the hardwood, next to a box of Belgian chocolates I would never eat. I already knew who it was. I let it buzz a second time before answering. "Hina!" Mama-san's voice. Not her honeyed club voice, but the flat iron tone she used for business. "Mama-san." Tanaka-sama's assistant has been in contact. You are to be compensated for your time. A delicate pause. He has bought out your month, Hina, exclusively. The sum he has deposited into the club's account is profound. My hand tightened on the pearls, their perfect, smooth surfaces biting into my palm. A month. Not a night. Not a week. A month. He was putting me in a cage and sliding the bolt. You are to be at his disposal, Mama-san continued, and I could hear the untold part. Or else. You will not come to the club. You will not see other clients. You are, for all intents and purposes, his. A car will be at your apartment in 1 hour to take you to a fitting. He has sent clothes, but he requires a formal gown for an event tonight. An event. My heart slammed against my ribs, a trapped bird. This was moving too fast. Do you understand me, Hina? I understand, I said, my voice a hollow echo of my own. Good. Do not disappoint him. Do not disappoint me. You are representing the kiss. This is the kind of arrangement that sets a girl up for life. Or ends it, I thought. The line clicked dead. I stared at the phone, trapped. I was utterly, completely trapped. He had bought my time. He owned me. The man who had taken everything was now, with a casual flick of his wrist, claiming the last hollow shell of what was left. And he was doing it all without even knowing who I was. The insult of it, the arrogance, was a physical blow. The rage that had been simmering since last night, the cold, hard, white-hot furnace in my chest exploded. It burned away the fear. It incinerated the panic. All my life I had been a pawn, Inoue Kenshin's daughter, the ruined orphan, the pretty new hostess. And now Kenji Tanaka's new toy. No more. I stood, the pearls still clutched in my fist. I walked to the wall, to the only thing I owned that had value. It was a single faded photograph, taped to the paint-chipped wall above my hot plate. My father. He was younger, his hair still black, his smile easy and real. We were at a park. I was on his shoulders, my face a mess of ice cream and joy. I was 8. I was alive. He was alive. I looked at his face, at the kind, gentle eyes that had once looked at me with such pride, the eyes that had been so empty and broken in those last few weeks. The memory, the one I kept locked away, the one I polished like a weapon, flooded me. The smell of his study, old paper, stale whiskey, ink. I was 15. I crept in, bringing him tea he wouldn't drink. He was at his desk, but he wasn't working. He was just staring. The bankruptcy papers were spread out before him, a sea of white. And one sheet at the very top, bearing a red stamp, the Tanaka-gumi logo, an Oni's head. It's just business, Hana-chan, he had whispered, his voice a rasp. A game for monsters. I didn't understand. I told him it would be okay. I told him we could start over. He had turned to me. and his eyes were gone. He wasn't there anymore. "You can't start over," he'd said, "when they take the ground from beneath your feet." The next morning I woke to silence. A heavy, terrible, absolute silence. And then from the study above my room, the thud. The sound of a chair tipping over. The sound that had split my life in two. I closed my eyes. The rage was now cold. It was a diamond. It was a blade. Kenji Tanaka thought he was playing a game with a doll. He thought he could buy me, dress me, break me. He had no idea. He didn't just give me gifts. He didn't just buy my time. He gave me access. He, the monster of my nightmares, had unlocked his own front door and invited me in. He didn't recognize me. He didn't know the ghost of Kenshin Inoue was now, finally, standing in his house. I opened my hand. The pearls were warm from my grip. This was the new plan. The old plan, saving money, hiring a lawyer, a private investigator, finding some small, petty way to get justice, was a child's dream. This was a war. He wanted to dress me? Fine, I would be his perfect, beautiful doll. He wanted me to smile. I would smile and he would see his own reflection in my eyes. He wanted me to drink with him. I would drink and I would listen. I would learn every secret, every weakness, every crack in his fortress. I would wear his gifts. I would eat his food. I would breathe his air. I would make myself so small, so perfect, so empty, that he would pour all his dark, lonely secrets into me. And when I was full, when I had the one piece of information I needed, the one leverage point, the one weakness, I would not just ruin him, I would not just take his company, I would burn his entire world to the ground, just as he had done to me. I walked to the tiny, cracked mirror. The girl who stared back was pale, her eyes too large, her dark hair a mess. The ruined 15-year-old ghost. Slowly, deliberately, I unclasped the black pearl necklace. I fastened it around my neck. The weight was immense, cold, perfect. The girl in the mirror vanished. The pearls covered the hollow of my throat. They gleamed against my skin. They were a collar. They were armor. The broken, tear-stained girl was gone. In her place stood Hina. I looked at my reflection, at the cold, beautiful, vengeful woman wearing the monster's chains. "You wanted to see me break, Oni-san," I whispered, my voice a silken promise, a vow of ice and fire. "You'll have to get in line." The car service buzzed from the lobby. I picked up the bruise-colored silk dress. It was time for my fitting.
Chapter 4. Kenji. The restaurant, Koyo, was a temple of silence and expensive taste. It was hidden down an unmarked alley in Ginza, the kind of place that had no sign, no menu, and a 3-year waiting list. The private room I'd secured was an exercise in minimalist power. A single, flawless sheet of hinoki wood served as the table, overlooking a private garden where a waterfall, illuminated by a single artful light, trickled over black stones. It was the most powerful, most exclusive, most boring room in all of Tokyo. I had brought her here to prove a point. I had brought her here to show her the world she could have. A world so far removed from the sticky floors and fake laughter of Kitsune's kiss that it might as well be on another planet. And she was, as expected, a vision. The car had taken her for a fitting. I'd had a stylist, the one who dressed the Prime Minister's wife, meet her. The result was staggering. She was in a simple, floor-length gown of midnight blue silk that clung to every curve. It was modest, yet it left nothing to the imagination. Her hair was swept up, revealing the elegant, heartbreakingly vulnerable line of her neck. And around that neck, gleaming with a cold, dark fire against her skin, were the black pearls I had sent. She was my doll, dressed and presented, and I had never wanted anything more in my life. The chef, Harada-san, is a living national treasure, I said, gesturing to the first course. It was a single translucent shrimp, a speck of wasabi, and a petal from a flower I couldn't name. It was art. It was wasted on me. "It is beautiful, Tanaka-sama," Hina replied. Her voice was just as polite, just as silken, just as fucking empty as it had been in the club. She ate with a delicate, practiced grace. She was not intimidated by the setting. She was not awed by the food. She was, it seemed, not impressed by me. And it was driving me absolutely, breathtakingly insane. I was Kenji Tanaka. When I walked into a room, men bowed and women, well, women did whatever I wanted. They were terrified or aroused or greedy. They were something. Hina was a beautiful, porcelain-skinned, infuriating void. "You don't like the sake?" I asked, pushing the rare, single-vintage bottle toward her. It cost more per glass than her Spartan apartment cost per month. Tatsu's report on her had been thorough and bleak. "It is excellent, Tanaka-sama." She smiled. It was the same smile she'd given the politician. It was the smile she'd given me. It was a shield. "Stop that," I growled. Her hand, which was lifting the tiny sake cup, paused. Her eyes met mine. "Stop what, Tanaka-sama?" "Stop calling me that, and stop smiling. You look like you're at a funeral." Her smile didn't falter, but it hardened, became brittle. "I am here at your pleasure, Tanaka-sama. I will smile if you wish me to smile. I will not, if you do not." I slammed my cup down. Not hard enough to break it, but hard enough to make the sake slosh. Hard enough to make the chef in the next room pause his chopping. Hard enough to make Tatsu, standing guard outside our paper-thin door, shift his weight. Hina didn't even blink. "Who are you?" I leaned forward, the table between us feeling as wide as the ocean. "I have men who would kill for me. I have rivals who would kill to be me. I am offering you a world on a silver platter, and you sit there, sipping sake like a ghost." I was trying to get a rise out of her. I was prodding, poking, digging. I needed to see that fire from last night. She set her cup down. Her movements were serene, controlled. "I am Hina, Tanaka-sama, a hostess, and you are my client, a very generous one." A client. I almost laughed. The word was a joke. "I am not your client. I own your month. I own that dress. I own those pearls. I own you." The words hung in the air, unspoken. Her eyes dropped to her hands, folded in her lap. The first crack. I saw her knuckles whiten. "There you are." "I am grateful for your generosity," she whispered. But I had pushed too hard. The fire was gone, replaced by that armor of submission. I had failed. I had become just another brute. Another man who thought he could buy his way through her walls. I sighed, leaning back. The anger and frustration drained out of me, leaving the familiar hollow ache, the boredom, the loneliness. "My father," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. I never talked about my father. He's the one who wanted the meeting with Sasaki. He's a man of tradition. I was testing the waters, saying something real. Hina looked up. She didn't speak. She just watched me. Her eyes were no longer empty. They were not polite. They were still, deep, listening. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the trickle of the waterfall outside. Her silence was a vacuum, and I, fool that I was, felt the sudden, desperate need to fill it. He still believes in the old ways, I found myself saying. I picked up my sake cup, staring into its depths. He believes in honor, in goodwill. I snorted, a harsh, ugly sound. There is no goodwill in our world. There is only what you can take and what you can hold. He thinks I'm too brutal, too fast. I was confessing to her, a hostess I'd known for 24 hours. He gave me the name Oni. Did you know that? When I was 17, my first job, he said I was a demon, that I had no heart. I drank the sake. It tasted like ash. He said it as an insult, but the name stuck. And now it's a reputation. The Oni. The demon. I looked at her. And the thing about reputations, Hina, is that you become them. You have to. You have to be the monster everyone expects you to be. You have to be so terrifying that no one ever gets close enough to see the man. My voice was rough. I had never told Tatsu this. I had never told anyone this. This was a truth I kept locked in my own chest, a truth that ate me alive from the inside out. And this sad-eyed woman, this beautiful enigma, had just pulled it out of me. She was just listening. Her head was slightly tilted, her gaze unwavering. She wasn't judging me. She wasn't fawning. She wasn't afraid. She was seeing me. The air in the room was so thick with tension, with my sudden raw exposure, that I could barely breathe. The space between us crackled. This was more intimate than any touch, more naked than any act of sex. I had talked more, really talked, in the last 5 minutes than I had in the last 5 years. I had to touch her. It was a physical need, a drowning man reaching for a life raft. I reached across the table. My hand, calloused and scarred, covered hers. Her hand was small, delicate, and shockingly warm. The jolt was the same as in the club, a high-voltage shock that went straight from my hand to my heart. I expected her to flinch, to pull away, to retreat back into her doll-like shell. She didn't move. Her eyes held mine. Her hand stayed under mine. I was shaken. I was closer to this woman, this stranger, than I had ever been to another living soul. I was terrified. I was saved. "You're the first person in years," I said, my voice a rasp I barely recognized, "who has just listened." I squeezed her hand. I was desperate. I was pathetic. I didn't care. "What do you want, Hina?" I whispered, the words a raw plea. "Name it. A house? That ridiculous sports car you see in the magazines? A new life, far away from all of this?" I leaned in, my world narrowing to her, to those dark, sad, intelligent eyes. "Anything. Name it, and it's yours." I smiled, a poor imitation of my usual cruel smirk. "There is only one rule." Her lips parted, as if she were about to speak. "Anything," I repeated, my thumb stroking the back of her hand, but leaving me. I was offering her the world, a cage of gold and silk, all because she had done the one thing no one else ever had. She had sat in the dark with me, and she had not run away. I waited for her answer, my heart, the one I'd thought long dead, beaming a heavy, hopeful, foolish rhythm in my chest.
Chapter 5. Hana. His confession hung in the air between us, a raw, gaping wound. He, Kenji the Oni Tanaka, the monster of my nightmares, the architect of my family's ruin, was lonely. He felt burdened. He saw himself as a victim of a reputation he'd been forced to build. The irony was so bitter, so profoundly acidic, that it nearly made me choke. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand on the flawless hinoki table, point at his handsome haunted face, and shriek, "You don't know what a real burden is. You don't know what it is to be haunted. You don't know what it is to scrub floors, to bow and scrape, to sell your smile, your time, yourself, piece by agonizing piece just to have a roof over your head. You don't know what it is to go to bed hungry, the sound of your father's body hitting the floor echoing in your memory." He was confessing to the ghost he had created, and he didn't even see it. But as I sat there, his large, warm hand still covering mine, his thumb stroking my skin in a lazy, proprietary circle, a different emotion rose up, thick and poisonous in my throat. Pity. I felt a sudden, sharp, unwelcome lurch of it. This powerful, terrifying man, who held the entire city in his grip, was, in that moment, just a man drowning in his own darkness, confessing his sins to a stranger, desperate for a connection. I loathed him for it. I loathed him for his weakness, for his confession, for his privileged, self-indulgent guilt. And I loathed myself, with a white-hot, searing intensity, for feeling that pity. This was a trick. This was a new, more dangerous form of his cruelty. Or worse, it was real, and that was the real danger. This vulnerability was a chink in his armor, and it was, terrifyingly, a chink in mine. The ghost of Inoue Kenshin demanded vengeance. The woman, Hina, who had been starved of human warmth for a decade, felt a treacherous, pathetic pull toward the fire. I had to crush it. I had to use it. His words still echoed in the silent, perfect room. Anything but leaving me. My hand, the one not trapped beneath his, was in my lap. I dug my nails into my palm, the sharp, crescent-shaped pain a welcome anchor. It was the pain of this world, the real world, not the false, intimate bubble he was trying to create. I was Hina, the doll, the listener. I slowly, deliberately turned my hand under his. I didn't pull away. I linked my fingers with his. It was the most disgusting, calculated, and effective thing I had ever done. He flinched, just slightly, as if he'd been shocked. His dark, intense gaze snapped to our joined hands, then back to my face. I could see the surprise, the hunger. He had bared his soul, and I had, in his eyes, accepted it. I gave him a new smile. Not the kitsune's kiss smile. Not the porcelain armor. This one was small, fragile, and hesitant. I let a lifetime of real sadness bleed into my eyes. I gave him the Hina he wanted to see. The broken doll who understood his pain. "Tanaka-sama," I whispered, my voice intentionally trembling. "Kenji," he corrected, his voice rough. His grip on my hand tightened. "Call me Kenji." My skin crawled. Kenji. The name was a curse on my tongue. "Kenji-san," I demurred, a perfect compromise of intimacy and respect. I looked down at our hands. You carry so much. I had no idea." He watched me, his expression unreadable, but his thumb was stroking my pulse point. Tap, tap, tap. Like he was counting my heartbeats. "It must be so difficult," I continued, my voice the barest breath. "To be the Oni, to have everyone expect you to be a monster, but you are not. Liar. 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 I see that now." "Do you?" he asked, his voice low. The car ride home was a masterclass in tension. He sat so close to me in the cavernous, leather-scented darkness of his armored Lexus, that his thigh was a line of solid, non-negotiable heat against my own. Tatsu was in the front passenger seat, a silent granite statue. There was a thick, bulletproof glass partition between us and the driver, sealing us in. A cage. "My father is a man of tradition," he said, picking up his thread from the restaurant, as if our hands had never touched, as if he hadn't just peeled himself open for me. He was testing me, seeing if I would hold his secrets. "Tradition can be a heavier burden than a sword," I offered. He turned his head in the darkness. I could only see the sharp silhouette of his jaw, the gleam of his eye. He was impressed. "You're not like them," he murmured. "The other girls. Their minds are empty. All they see is the money." "They see what you show them," I said, bold. "You show them the Oni. You get a girl who fears the Oni. You show them your wallet. You get a girl who wants your wallet." "And what did I show you, Hina?" My heart was pounding. This was it. The opening. I think," I said, "you showed me a man who is trapped. You are so powerful. But you seem alone. Especially with rivals." I let the word hang in the air. He chuckled, a dark, dangerous sound. Rivals. That's a polite word for them. "Like Sasaki-san?" I whispered, as if the name itself were a danger. I watched his profile. His jaw tightened. Bingo. "Sasaki is a snake," Kenji growled. "A venomless one. He thinks he's a dragon, but he's just a lizard, puffing up his throat. He's an irritation, a problem that needs solving." He frightens you?" I asked, playing the perfect, naive doll. He turned to me, and his smile in the darkness was all teeth. It was the Oni. It was the most terrifying, most attractive thing I had ever seen. My body, that great stupid traitor, responded with a jolt that had nothing to of with fear. "Frighten me?" he scoffed. "Hina, a man like Sasaki doesn't frighten me. He bores me, but his boredom is about to end, and so is he." He was boasting. To me. "How?" I breathed, my eyes wide. "He is so established." Kenji leaned in. His scent, that iron and sake smell, mixed with expensive cologne, was intoxicating. It was the scent of power. It was the scent of my enemy. "Because he's an idiot," he whispered, his lips near my ear. "He moves in the light. He thinks he's a politician. I move in the shadows. He thinks my goodwill meetings are a sign of weakness. He doesn't know about the shipment." My blood went cold. "Shipment." "Shipment?" I repeated, my voice a perfect, artless echo. He pulled back, a sly, satisfied look on his face. He'd said too much, or perhaps he'd said exactly as much as he'd intended. He was feeding me. He was binding me to him with his secrets. Consolidation," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "A new arrangement at the port. Let's just say, Sasaki's traditions are about to be modernized, and I will be the one to do it. The port. A shipment. A move against Sasaki." I had it. I had the knife. I had the time and the place. My mind was racing, the pieces clicking together so fast I was dizzy. The car slowed. We were outside my building. The sight of the cheap, peeling paint, the flickering neon sign of the ramen shop downstairs, was a violent shock after the opulence I'd been swimming in. The driver opened the door. Kenji got out, and then turned, holding his hand out for me. I placed my hand in his. He didn't just help me out. He pulled me, his grip strong, bringing me flush against him on the empty sidewalk. "I will see you to your door," he said. It was not a question. Tatsu and the driver remained by the car, two dark shadows. The walk up the narrow, linoleum-cracked stairs was the most surreal moment of my life. This god of the underworld, this man in a suit that cost more than my entire building, was walking up the filthy staircase of my tenement, his hand a heavy, possessive brand on the small of my back. We reached my door, number 3B. The paint was chipped. I fumbled in my tiny borrowed clutch for my keys. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the sheer, terrifying proximity of the climax. I found the key. I went to put it in the lock. His hand covered mine, stilling the movement. He pressed me back against the door. His body was a wall of heat, trapping me. The hallway was narrow, dark, and suddenly, suffocatingly small. "Hina," he breathed. He was so close. His shadow covered me. I could see the flecks of gold in his dark, dark eyes. I could feel the rumble of his chest. His other hand came up, his thumb brushing my jaw. His touch was rough, calloused, and it sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated fire through my veins. I should have flinched. I should have kneed him. I should have jammed my key into his eye. I didn't move. I just stared. My body was a traitor. It was alive. After 10 years of being a numb, hollow ghost, it was alive. And it was humming. A high, thin wire of tension, drawn taut by him, by the monster. His gaze dropped to my lips. "Kiss him." A dark, treacherous voice whispered in my head. "Kiss him. Find out what he tastes like. See if he tastes like the poison he is." "Kill him!" my father's ghost screamed. "He is the Oni! He is death!" He leaned in. I could feel his breath, hot and smelling of sake. My eyes fluttered shut. My lips parted. I hated him. I hated him. I hated him. And God help me, I wanted him. His lips brushed mine. A ghost of a kiss. A promise, a threat. And then he was gone. He pulled back. The loss of his heat was a physical blow. He was still holding my hand, still pinning it to the door. He looked at me. A long, searching look. He was memorizing my face. He was seeing the conflict. He was savoring it. "I will see you tomorrow, Hina-chan," he said, his voice a possessive, velvet growl. He released my hand. He turned and walked down the hall, his footsteps silent. I didn't breathe until I heard the heavy thud of the Lexus doors closing. I slid down my own door, my legs giving out. I was shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the lock. I stumbled inside, into my dark, empty room. The gifts were still there. The pearls were on my dresser. I ripped the midnight blue gown off, tearing the delicate silk. I didn't care. I stood in the center of my room, in the cheap, thin cotton slip I'd worn beneath. I was shaking. But not with fear. With power. He thought he was the master. He thought he was the one pulling the strings. He thought he had bought me, seduced me, confessed to me. He didn't know he was the doll. I walked to my hot plate and pulled the faded photograph of my father off the wall. "I have it, Otu-san," I whispered to his smiling face. "I have the way." The port, the shipment, Sasaki, the game was on. And I was finally ready to play.
Chapter 6. Kenji. My office was a cage of glass and steel, suspended 40 floors above the Tokyo sprawl. From here, I was a god. I could watch the city's arteries pulse with light, watch the storms roll in from the bay, watch the chaos of the world reduced to a silent, elegant map. It was my sanctuary. It was sterile. It was, for the first time in a decade, utterly, painfully boring. I stared at the data on my screen. Shipping manifests, profit margins, surveillance reports on Sasaki's operations. It was the architecture of my empire, and it all felt like nothing. I couldn't get her out of my head. Her scent, that impossible mix of jasmine and steel, the feel of her small, warm hand, not flinching from mine. The way she'd looked at me, her eyes a deep, dark ocean of sorrow. I had bared a piece of my soul to her. A hostess. A woman I'd known for less than 48 hours. Was I losing my mind? I'd spent the last 20 years building the Oni, a creature of absolute control, devoid of weakness. And this woman, this sad-eyed doll, had walked in, and with a few whispered words and a steady gaze, found the one crack in my armor. She hadn't just found it. She had wedged her fingers into it. I was restless. I was agitated. I was thinking about what she would wear tonight. I was thinking about the exact shade of her lips. I was thinking about that moment in the hallway when she had looked up at me, her lips parted, and I had felt knock, knock. 2 sharp, precise raps. "Enter," I barked. The door slid open. Tatsu entered, my shadow, my second in command. He was a man carved from granite, his loyalty absolute, his face an unreadable mask. He held a single thin file. "The information you requested, Tanaka-sama," he said. He placed the file on my black onyx desk. "That was fast," I noted. "She is not a difficult person to trace, sir. She lives a quiet life." I grunted, leaning back in my chair. "So, who is she? What put that shadow in her eyes? A bad debt? An abusive ex-boyfriend?" "Not exactly, sir." Tatsu's voice had a note in it I'd never heard before. Hesitation. I straightened. I opened the file. The first page was a photograph. Hina, the hostess. Her club ID photo. That perfect, cold, beautiful smile. The second page. A different woman. She was younger, 15, maybe 16. A school uniform, her hair in a simple ponytail. She was bright-eyed, her smile wide, innocent, and unburdened. It was a face so full of life it was almost painful to look at. It was, unmistakably, her. I looked at the text on the page. Name, Hana Inoue. Age, 28. Family, none. Known associates, Mama-san, proprietor, Kitsune's Kiss. Various club clientele, Inoue. The name meant nothing to me. I kept reading. Place of birth, Tokyo. Education, Kichijoji Daiichi High School. Dropped out, final year. Residence, one chome, Suganami, a tenement building. Financials, one bank account. Minimal savings, no debt. Father, Kenshin Inoue. Mother, Akari Inoue. Deceased, Kenshin Inoue. My hand, the one resting on the file, suddenly felt cold. The name was a ghost, a whisper from a locked room deep in my memory. "Tatsu," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Kenshin Inoue." "Yes, sir." He was the owner of Inoue Textiles. Inoue Textiles. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. The sterile, quiet office, the city lights below. It all dissolved. I was 17 again. I'm in my father's office. The room is dark, smelling of old tatami and stale cigar smoke. He throws a file on the desk in front of me, thinner than the one I'm holding now. "A test," my father says, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Inoue Textiles. They have refused our protection. An insult." I look at the file. A small, insignificant company. A nobody. "What do you want me to do?" I ask. I'm 17. I'm immortal. I'm bored. My father smiles. It is not a pleasant expression. I want you to make an example, he says. Crush them, their supply lines, their credit, their reputation. I want you to take the ground from beneath their feet. Leave nothing. He looks at me, his eyes cold and assessing. Show me you are not just my son. Show me you are an Oni. I had. It was my first job, my masterpiece. I hadn't used a single bullet or even a fist. I'd used the pen. I'd called in markers, threatened suppliers, flooded the market with cheap knockoffs, and, in a final brutal stroke, bought up their debt and called it in, all at once. It took me 6 weeks. Inoue Textiles was bankrupt. Kenshin Inoue. What happened to the father? I asked Tatsu, my voice a rasp. I already knew. Tatsu looked at a point on the wall just over my shoulder. Deceased. Suicide. 10 years ago, the same week his company was formally dissolved. The thud of a chair tipping over. I looked down at the file, at the 2 photographs, side by side. The bright-eyed, innocent girl, full of life. The cold, beautiful hostess, full of shadows. Hana Inoue, Kenshin Inoue's daughter. Jesus Christ, I whispered. All the pieces, all the fragments of the puzzle that was Hina slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. Her stillness, her silence. The way she'd listened to my pathetic, drunken confession about my father, about the Oni reputation. The very reputation I had earned by destroying her. The fire in her eyes. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't strength. It was hatred. Pure, cold, and aimed directly at my heart. She had sat at my table, let me touch her, let me buy her, all while knowing, all while planning. A hostess, a beautiful porcelain-skinned, infuriating void. A void, a vacuum, pulling me in, pulling my secrets out of me. My first thought, she's a fool. She's going to get herself killed. My second thought, hot and dark, crowding out the first. She's magnificent. She hadn't just survived. She had trained. She had spent 10 years sharpening herself into the perfect weapon, walked straight into the lion's den, and smiled as she put her head in my mouth. This wasn't a hostess. This was a warrior. I wasn't angry. I didn't know what I was. I was shaken. I was haunted. The one nameless, faceless ghost from my past. The one act of casual cruelty that had cemented my power. The act I had buried for a decade. It had a name. It had a face. And she was the one woman I couldn't get out of my head. Tatsu, I said. Sir. She knows who I am. It was not a question. It would seem so, sir. And she's playing a game. I stood up. I walked to the window, staring down at the city, at my city. This changed everything. This changed nothing. The pull I felt toward her, the dark, obsessive need, it didn't vanish. It ignited. The game I thought I was playing, the rich, bored Yakuza and the beautiful, sad hostess, was a child's pantomime. This was real. She's not playing hard to get, I said, my voice dangerously soft. I could feel Tatsu's gaze on my back. I turned, a slow, cold smile touching my lips. The first real smile I'd felt in days. The Oni was back. She's playing for revenge. Tatsu tensed, his hand instinctively moving to his jacket. Sir, this is a threat. We need to neutralize her. Now. I'll have her picked up. No. Tatsu froze. Sir? You will do nothing, I said, walking back to my desk. I picked up the file, looking at the two photographs. The girl she was, the woman she had become. This doesn't change my plans, Tatsu. It only focuses them. I closed the file. Cancel my meeting with the Sasaki-gumi tomorrow night. Sir? But the shipment. I don't give a shit about the shipment. Not right now. I looked up, my eyes meeting his. He saw the new fire in my gaze. He saw the obsession, and for the first time in his life, my old friend looked afraid. I'm taking Hana-chan on another date.
Chapter 7. Hana. The hotel ballroom was a constellation of glittering, lethal stars. Hundreds of them, the most powerful and dangerous men in Tokyo, all encased in bespoke suits, their women dripping in jewels that had been bought with blood, blackmail, and extortion. The air was thick with the scent of expensive French perfume, Cuban cigar smoke, and the untold, unspoken violence that simmered just beneath the surface. It was the Tanaka-gumi's annual winter gala, a farcical display of legitimacy. And I was, for all intents and purposes, the guest of honor. I was a prisoner on a pedestal. My hand was tucked into the crook of Kenji's arm. I was not holding on to him. He was tethering me. His grip was light, almost casual. But I had felt its true strength. It was the grip of a man who would not, could not let go. I was a walking, breathing testament to his power. The midnight blue dress from the restaurant had been replaced. Tonight, I was in a gown of blood-red silk. So perfectly tailored it felt like a second skin. It was shockingly simple, with a high, modest neckline and long sleeves, but it clung to every curve, leaving nothing and everything to the imagination. And around my neck, a heavy, cold circle of ownership, were the black pearls. He had fastened them himself in his penthouse suite, a sterile, glass-walled apartment that overlooked the entire city, before we'd left. My back had been to him, and I'd watched in the mirror as his large, scarred hands had fumbled, just slightly, with the delicate, diamond-encrusted clasp. His knuckles had brushed the bare skin of my nape. I had not flinched. "Red is your color," he had murmured, his voice a low, possessive rumble in my ear. "It speaks of passion, of debts." He had been playing with me all day. Ever since he'd picked me up, his eyes had been different. The boredom was gone, replaced by a dark, knowing, almost playful intensity. He was a cat that had cornered a mouse, but instead of killing it, he was nudging it, seeing what it would do. He knew. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. He had not said a word. He had not used my real name, but the man who had bared his soul in the restaurant was gone, replaced by this predator. He was watching me, waiting. And he, in his arrogance, was enjoying the game. He thought he was the only one who knew the rules. He didn't know tonight was the night the game board would be set on fire. "Kenji-san," I said, my voice the perfect, silken purr of Hina. "The room is overwhelming." He chuckled, his chest vibrating against my arm. "It is a room full of monsters, Hina-chan, but you are the most beautiful and therefore the most dangerous thing in it." He led me through the crowd. The Yakuza, men who would slit a throat for a sideways glance, bowed. Their wives and mistresses smiled, their eyes like chips of ice dissecting me. I was the new toy, the flavor of the month. They thought I was a fool. "Good." "You're thirsty," he stated. He didn't ask. He guided me to a champagne fountain, picked up a flute, and handed it to me. My hand was, to my shame, trembling. Just slightly. "Nervous?" he murmured, his eyes fixed on the tiny tremor. You make me nervous, Kenji-san, I whispered. It was the truth. Just not the one he thought. Good. My clutch, a tiny beaded thing that matched the dress, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Inside it was a lipstick, a lace handkerchief, and a slim black burner phone. The port, the shipment, Sasaki. He had fed me the pieces. I had spent the last 24 hours, in the lonely, terrified hours of the morning, putting them together. I'd made one call to an old friend of my father's, a man who owed him a debt and who now worked, begrudgingly, in customs. I had confirmed the time. The shipment was tonight, 10 p.m., a consolidation of medical supplies. It was 9:45 p.m. Excuse me, Kenji-san, I said, placing a hand on his chest. His suit was wool, so finely woven it felt like silk. Beneath it, his body was solid, hot, and tense. I must freshen up. His dark, knowing eyes held mine. That playful, cruel smile touched his lips. He was wondering if I would try to run. Do not be long, he said. He captured my hand, lifted it to his lips, and kissed my knuckles. A public, possessive, searing brand. I find I am lost. Without you. The crowd saw. The crowd whispered. I was his. I turned, and with a measured, calm grace I did not feel, I walked toward the ladies' lounge. I did not run. I did not look back. I could feel his gaze on me, a physical weight on my back, with every step. The lounge was an oasis of marble and white silk. It was, for a miracle, empty. My reflection in the mirror was a stranger, a beautiful, scarlet-clad ghost. The pearls were a noose. My face was pale, my eyes too large, burning with a feverish intensity. You can do this, I whispered to the woman in the mirror. You must do this. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely open the clutch. The burner phone felt cold, slick, and evil. This was the point of no return. This was not just about sabotage. This was a double cross. My tip wasn't going to the real police. That was too simple, too clean. No, I had spent the last of my savings finding the name of a customs official I knew from Whispers at the Kiss was on the Sasaki-gumi's payroll. I wasn't just sinking Kenji's ship. I was going to make it look like his rival. Sasaki had given the order. I was sending the tip to Sasaki's man, framing it as an anonymous warning. The official would alert Sasaki, who would panic, thinking he'd been caught. Or better, he'd alert the Metropolitan Police, trying to set Kenji up, not realizing the bust would expose his own corrupt official. Either way, the shipment would be seized. The police would be involved. And Kenji would rightly blame Sasaki. It wasn't just revenge, it was a war. I was lighting the fuse that would burn both their houses down. My fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, typed the message. T-Gumi shipment, Pier 7, 10 p.m., Docking Bay 4, medical supplies, T-Gumi insider. The last part was the poison. The insider tip would make both sides tear their own organizations apart, looking for a traitor who didn't exist. My thumb hovered over the send button. Thud. The sound from my father's study, the smell of whiskey and ink. This is for you, Otu-san. I pressed send. A small whoosh. The message was gone. I immediately powered the phone down, opened the back, and snapped the SIM card in half. I dropped the pieces and the phone into the lady's sanitary disposal bin. The evidence was gone. It was done. I stood. My legs felt weak. I was giddy. I was nauseated. I had just declared war on the entire Tokyo underworld. I reapplied my lipstick. My hand was perfectly steady. The walk back was a dream. The music was louder, the lights brighter. I was floating. I saw Kenji standing exactly where I had left him, a dark, brooding god in the center of the room. He was watching me. He had not stopped watching me. As I approached, that cold, playful smile returned. He was holding a new glass of champagne for me. "You returned," he murmured, his voice a low tease. "You knew I would," I replied, my voice just as light. I was high on the act, drunk on the power. "I did," he said, "because you are a good girl, Hina. You always come when you are called." The arrogance of it. The blindness. It made me want to laugh. He pulled me onto the dance floor. It was not a request. His hand, hot and heavy, splayed across the small of my back, his fingers pressing into my skin, burning me through the thin silk. His other hand engulfed mine. We moved. He was a terrifyingly good dancer. He led with an absolute, uncompromising grace. I was not his partner. I was an extension of his will. He spun me, pulled me close, our bodies flush from thigh to chest. The tension that had been a spark was now a raging bonfire. My body, the great, stupid traitor, was alive, humming. I hated him. I hated him. And I had never been more aware of another human being in my life. "You look beautiful tonight," he murmured, his lips brushing my hair. "You dressed me, Kenji-san," I breathed, tilting my head back. "So I did." He spun me, a slow, intoxicating turn, and then pulled me back, hard, against his chest. His face was in the curve of my neck. I could feel his breath, hot and sharp on my skin. "But you have been distracted," he whispered, his lips so close they were almost, but not quite, touching my ear. "It is a large party," I parried. "It's not the party." He pulled back, just enough to look me in the eyes. The playful light was gone, replaced by an intensity that was cold, sharp, and utterly terrifying. "You're waiting for something." My blood turned to ice. He knows. I don't know what you mean," I stammered. The first real fear, the panic, began to claw at my throat. "Don't you?" He smiled. It was not a smile. It was the baring of teeth. "You look beautiful tonight, Hana." My heart stopped. It did not just pause. It did not stutter. It stopped. My lungs ceased to function. The air in the ballroom was suddenly too thin to breathe. He had not said Hina. He had not said Hina-chan. He had said, "Hana." "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" He whispered, his hand on my back tightening, his fingers digging in like claws, bruising me. "Did you really think you could play in my world and I wouldn't look?" "Inoue-san." Inoue-san. The name hit me like a physical blow. It was the sound of my father's ghost. It was the sound of my life, ending for the second time. I stumbled. My composure, my 10 years of training, my perfect Hina mask. It didn't just crack. It shattered. He was the only thing holding me up. His grip was iron. You. I couldn't speak. I was choking on my own name. What? He mocked, his voice a cruel, soft velvet. Knew? Of course I knew. I've known. I was just waiting to see what you would do, to see how far the little mouse would go. He looked disappointed. And this was it? A phone call? A vibration. Not from me, from him. His phone in his breast pocket was buzzing, right against my chest. I could feel it, a frantic, angry vibration against my heart. He didn't break eye contact. His dark, endless gaze was fixed on mine, savoring my terror, my confusion, my absolute soul-shattering ruin. Slowly, painfully slowly, he reached into his pocket and retrieved his phone. He looked down at the screen. I watched his face. A slow, cold, feral smile spread across his lips. It was the most terrifying expression I had ever seen. It was the Oni. He looked up from the phone, back at me. Well, he said, his voice now light, almost cheerful. It seems my shipment has a problem. He slid the phone back into his pocket. and before I could react, before I could even breathe, his hand left my back, shot up to my neck, and his fingers closed around the black pearls. He didn't squeeze. He just held me. A warning. A promise. "Let's go," he said, his voice a low, lethal command. He began to pull me, dragging me off the dance floor, his grip on my necklace a leash. "You and I," he whispered, as the crowd parted before us, their faces a blur of confusion and fear, "have something to discuss."
Chapter 8. Kenji. The ballroom, the music, the crowd of whispering sycophants. It all dissolved. The world shrank to the woman I was dragging, her stockinged feet slipping on the polished marble as she scrambled to keep up. My hand wasn't on her necklace anymore. It was clamped around her upper arm, my fingers digging into bone, a non-negotiable anchor. The crowd parted for us as if I were a leper king, their faces a blur of shock and fear. Good. Let them see. Let them see the Oni's new prize. Let them see what happened to dolls who thought they could play. Tatsu and my other men materialized from the shadows, forming a moving phalanx around us. We didn't walk. We swept. We were a force of nature, a dark tide clearing the hotel lobby. "Sir," Tatsu said, his voice a low rumble. "The car." "The suite," I snapped. "Now." We didn't wait for a public elevator. Tatsu used my personal key on a service lift, a sterile steel box. I shoved her in, my men piling in after us, their bodies filling the small space. There was no air, only the scent of her perfume, jasmine and fear, and the coppery tang of my own adrenaline. She was silent, not a sob, not a plea. She was pressed into the corner, her red dress a scream against the gray steel. Her chest was heaving, her dark, terrified eyes fixed on my face. The Hina mask was gone, shattered. In its place was Hana, the ghost, the girl from the file. And she was, in her terror, the most beautiful, most alive thing I had ever seen. The boredom, the hollow ache I'd carried for a decade, was gone. It had been burned away by her betrayal. I wasn't angry. No, this was something else. This was a high, a rush of pure, undiluted power. This was the thrill of a real hunt. I had been playing chess against amateurs, and she, a pawn, had suddenly sprouted the wings of a dragon. The doors opened on the penthouse floor. Tatsu and my men fanned out, clearing the hall, their hands on their weapons. It was a formality. No one would dare. I unlocked the suite, kicked the door open, and threw her inside. She stumbled, her ridiculously expensive heel catching on the thick pile rug, and she went down. She fell in a sprawl of red silk and pale limbs, the black pearls spilling around her throat like a dark rosary. She was a piece of art, a masterpiece of broken, beautiful vengeance. I didn't help her up. I walked past her, shrugging out of my suit jacket, and tossed it onto a chair. I loosened my tie. I turned and stalked to the bar, pouring myself 3 fingers of whiskey. Not the weak, overpriced swill from the club. This was my own. It was 30-year-old single malt, and it tasted like smoke and fire. I drank it in one go. The burn was a welcome, clarifying pain. Then I turned. I leaned back against the bar, a god in my own glass-walled heaven, and I looked at her. She was still on the floor, pushing herself up onto her elbows, her hair a wild storm, her eyes full of a fire I'd been dying to see. "So," I said, my voice dangerously soft, dangerously calm. "Was that it?" She just stared at me, breathing hard. "All that work?" I continued, pacing toward her. I began to circle her, a shark admiring its prey. 10 years of survival, 10 years of sharpening your claws, all to get close to me. And this was your grand plan? A single anonymous tip? I laughed. It was a cold, harsh sound that echoed in the vast, silent room. A phone call, Inoue-san? You brought a knife to a war. You didn't even... I'm disappointed. I stopped in front of her. I crouched down, bringing myself to her level. She flinched, pulling back. I expected more. I whispered, my voice a cruel taunt. From Kenshin Inoue's daughter. He at least had the guts to build something before he lost it. I saw the change. It was faster than a lightning strike. The fear in her eyes vanished, consumed, incinerated by a rage so pure, so potent, it was almost visible. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Don't!" she hissed, the word a venomous spit. "Don't you dare!" "Don't I dare what?" I taunted, a savage grin spreading across my face. I grabbed the pearls, yanking her forward just slightly. "Don't I dare speak his name?" The name of the man I crushed. She screamed. It was not a scream of fear. It was a sound torn from the very depths of her soul. A sound of 10 years of compressed rage, grief, and agony. She launched herself at me. She was a fury, a goddess of vengeance in red silk. Her hands, no longer delicate, were claws. She raked them at my face, at my chest. She was screaming, not words, just that raw, primal sound of pain. "You!" she shrieked as she pummeled my chest. "You took everything! You took him! You took my life!" I didn't flinch. I just stood, my arms at my sides, and let her. I let her. This was it. This was the woman I had been searching for. Not the doll. Not the ghost. This was the warrior. She hit me, her small fists striking my chest, my stomach. It was like being battered by a storm. I was a mountain. I let the wind and the rain beat against me. I let her fury wash over me. It was the most honest, most real interaction I had had in my entire adult life. Her hatred was a form of intimacy. It was the most potent aphrodisiac I had ever known. "You killed him!" she sobbed, her blows weakening. "You kokilla him and you don't even... The storm broke. The rage, having nowhere to go against my unmoving, unyielding form, collapsed in on itself. The screams turned to sobs. The fists turned to open, trembling hands. She was still. She was on her knees, her hands pressed against my chest, her forehead resting against my sternum. She was sobbing, great, shuddering, body-racking sobs that tore at her and at something deep, locked away inside me. She was a crumpled heap of red silk and broken dreams. I stood there for a long moment, my hands still at my sides. I was breathing hard. The adrenaline was pounding through me. Slowly, as if in a trance, I lifted my hand. I placed it on her head, my fingers sinking into the soft, silken chaos of her hair. She froze. "Good," I said, my voice raw, a rasp I barely recognized. She looked up, her face a mess of tears and running mascara. She was exquisite. "That," I said, my thumb stroking her temple, "is the woman I saw. That is the woman I've been waiting for. Not the doll." I was about to pull her to her feet. I was about to tell her, I don't even know what, that the game was just beginning, that I would never let her go. but the door to the penthouse slammed open. "Sir!" "Tatsu." He never raised his voice. He never entered without permission. My hand dropped from Hana's hair. My head snapped up. The Oni was back in an instant. The strange, intimate moment shattered. Tatsu was in the doorway. He was pale. "Sir," he said, his voice tight, panicked. "The port! It's a disaster." "I know," I said, annoyed. "Sasaki took the bait. The shipment is gone. A clean dash." "No, sir," Tatsu interrupted me. He interrupted me. "You don't understand. It wasn't Sasaki. It wasn't his customs man." Hana, on the floor, had stopped crying. She was staring at Tatsu, her eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. "It was the Metropolitan Police," Tatsu said, his voice strained. "A full, organized, clean task force. They weren't there to seize the shipment, sir. They were there to make arrests. They were waiting." My blood went cold. This was not the plan. Not her plan. "They've arrested everyone," Tatsu continued, his voice grim. "Our men. Sasaki's men, who were clearly there to observe the bust. And sir, they even arrested the customs official, the one on Sasaki's payroll." I stood still. The whiskey was a cold lump in my gut. Arrested our men. Arrested Sasaki's men. Arrested the corrupt official. It was a clean sweep. I looked down at Hana. Her face was ashen. This wasn't her plan. This was something bigger, something catastrophic. She hadn't just lit a fire, she had firebombed the entire district. And then the pieces clicked. The police were waiting. They didn't just act on an anonymous tip. They knew. They arrested Sasaki's man, the same man she had tipped off, the same man who, I suddenly realized, had been feeding information to both Sasaki and the police. The real traitor. The one man I had been hunting for 6 months. I looked at Hana. I looked at Tatsu. And I started to laugh. It was not a small laugh. It was a cold, dark, booming laugh that echoed off the glass walls. The Oni, unmasked, not as a demon, but as a man who had just seen the face of God, and she was a disaster. "Sir?" Tatsu said, his hand on his weapon, clearly thinking I had finally, truly lost my mind. "You," I said, turning to Hana. My voice was full of a dark, manic, ecstatic glee. "You magnificent, catastrophic, brilliant little fool!" I stalked toward her. I grabbed her by the arm, yanking her to her feet. She was a rag doll, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. "You didn't ruin me, Hana," I said, my face inches from hers. "You just inadvertently exposed the one true traitor in my organization. The one man I couldn't find. The one leak that was draining me dry. I was in her debt. A dangerous, violent, all-consuming debt. You didn't ruin me," I whispered, my voice a feral growl. "You just might have saved my entire fucking organization." I pulled her closer, my hand sliding from her arm to her jaw, my thumb pressing against her pulse. It was frantic, a hummingbird's wing. "But now," I said, my smile dropping, the cold, hard reality slamming into place. "The police are hunting for the anonymous informant, and the Yakuza, all of the Yakuza, are hunting for the person who brought the police to our door. The person who declared war." Her eyes were wide, trapped. She understood. I pulled her flush against me, my arm wrapping around her waist, claiming her, branding her. You just made yourself the most wanted woman in Tokyo, I whispered, my lips brushing her ear. You are trapped, Inoue-san. I pulled back, forcing her to look at me. You're mine.
Chapter 9. Hana. The penthouse with its glass walls and dizzying view had been a cage. This was a tomb. I wasn't in the sleek black Lexus. Tatsu, his face a mask of granite and cold duty, had separated me from Kenji at the hotel's service entrance. While Kenji was presumably swept away in his armored luxury, I was bundled, my head unceremoniously pushed down, into the back of a black windowless van. I was no longer a guest. I was cargo. The drive was silent and, from the winding, uneven roads, long. When the van's doors finally rolled open, the air was different. It was cool, clean, and smelled of pine and damp stone. I was pulled out. We were in a graveled courtyard, surrounded by high, impossibly high stone walls. The moon was a sliver of bone overhead, illuminating the silhouette of a traditional, sprawling Japanese estate. This was not a modern penthouse. This was a fortress, the ancestral home of the Tanaka-gumi. This way, a guard said. He didn't touch me, but his presence, and that of the other man, was a physical force, herding me across the gravel, which crunched with an unnervingly loud, funereal sound. Heavy wooden doors, bound in black iron, were opened from the inside. We walked through silent, dark wood corridors that felt ancient. The floors, polished to a mirror sheen, reflected my blood-red dress, making it look like I was wading through a river of gore. Finally, a shoji screen slid open. A hand on my back, not gentle, shoved me inside. The screen slid shut, the thud of the latch a final, definitive sound. A cage door slamming. I was alone. The room was exquisite. It was a prison designed by a poet. The tatami mats were new, smelling faintly of sweet grass. One wall was a priceless silk screen depicting a serene, snow-capped mountain. The other wall was glass. It looked out onto a private karasansui, a dry garden of raked white sand and black moss-covered stones, all lit by a single artful spotlight. It was beautiful. It was sterile. It was a cell. My reflection in the glass was a ghost in a party dress. I was still wearing the red silk. I was still wearing his pearls. I was a jarring, garish splash of blood in this temple of serene, calculated emptiness. The adrenaline was gone now, the high-octane thrill of the strike, the terror of the confrontation. It had all evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hollow, stomach-churning dread. My plan. My perfect 10-year plan. It hadn't just failed. It had exploded, taking me with it. I didn't just sabotage a deal. I didn't just start a war between Kenji and Sasaki. I had, in my arrogant, idiotic quest, brought the entire Metropolitan Police down on all of them. I hadn't just exposed Kenji's traitor. I had exposed myself. The police are hunting for the anonymous informant. And the Yakuza, all of the Yakuza, are hunting for the person who brought the police to our door. Kenji's words. I was a dead woman. If the police found me, I'd be a material witness, buried in a system that would chew me up and spit me out. If the Yakuza found me, Sasaki, the elders, anyone, my death would not be quick. It would not be clean. They would make an example of me. I wrapped my arms around myself, a violent shiver racking my body. The red silk was thin, useless against the sudden, penetrating cold. And Kenji, he had laughed. He had called me magnificent. He had grabbed me, claimed me, and saved me. The monster who had destroyed my life had, with that same possessive, brutal power, just saved it. Why? The question was a torment. It was a hook in my brain, twisting and turning. Why protect me? He knew. He'd known. He'd known who I was, and he'd played with me, toyed with me, let me walk into his gala wearing his pearls, all while knowing I was there to destroy him. I had been so focused for so long on the pure, cold, diamond-hard clarity of my hatred. It had been my guiding star, my fuel, my only reason for living. And now, it was gone. It wasn't that I didn't hate him. I did. I loathed him. But the hatred was no longer clean. It was polluted. It was muddied by his confession in the restaurant. It was confused by that searing, electric, traitorous pull I felt when he was near. It was shattered by the look in his eyes when he'd called me brilliant for ruining him. My hatred, the one thing I trusted, was now a confused, ugly, terrifying mess, and I, floating without my anchor, was utterly, completely lost. I sank to the tatami, my legs giving out. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. I was hollow. A doll, finally and truly broken. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour. A lifetime. The shoji screen slid open. I didn't look up. I didn't have to. The air in the room changed, just as it had in the club. The temperature dropped. The air grew thicker, heavier, charged with that same intoxicating and terrifying energy. He was here. He was silent. I could hear the soft, almost imperceptible rustle of his clothes. He was no longer in his bespoke suit. "Look at me." His voice was not the playful, cruel one from the gala. It was not the raw, confessional one from the restaurant. This was a new voice. It was quiet. It was cold. It was the voice of absolute command. Slowly, I lifted my head. He was standing in the center of the room. He'd changed. He was in a simple, dark blue yukata, tied loosely at the waist. His hair was damp, slicked back from his face. He looked like a samurai, a warlord from another, more brutal age. There was a fresh, angry red cut on his jaw, and a new, blossoming bruise on his cheekbone. He had been in a fight. Not a verbal one. A real one. He was just watching me. His gaze was heavy, unreadable. "The situation," he said, his voice a low, flat rumble, "is complicated." "Complicated," I repeated, my voice a dry, broken rasp. I exposed your traitor. You laughed." "Yes," he said. He walked, not toward me, but toward the glass wall, pacing, his movements as fluid and dangerous as a panther's. "You did. You handed me his head on a platter. My father was impressed." "Your father," I spat. "The Oyabun, the man who had given the order to his monster son. He is a traditionalist," Kenji said, staring out at the garden. "He was impressed by my brilliant move to root out the traitor." "Your move?" I whispered, the blood draining from my face. "Of course." He turned, and his smile was a cold, sharp blade. "You didn't think I would tell him the truth, did you? That my new toy had accidentally declared war on the entire Tokyo underworld?" He stepped toward me. "No, I took the credit. I am the brilliant, ruthless Oni, who sacrificed a shipment and a dozen of his own men to expose a rat." He was in front of me now, looming. I was still on the floor, and he was a mountain. "But," he continued, his voice dropping, "my father is not a fool. Nor are the other elders. The police are now involved. They are sweeping the city. An anonymous informant has given them cause. And when the Yakuza are inconvenienced, they demand a price. They demand blood." He crouched down, just as he had in the penthouse. His face was inches from mine. I could smell the antiseptic from the cut on his jaw. "They demand a head, Hana," he whispered. "And the head they are demanding is yours." My breath hitched. This was it. "You have two choices," he said, his gaze fixed on mine, dark and hypnotic. "My father is a man of honor. He wants this mess cleaned, He wants the informant found and dealt with. Choice one, I can give you to him. I flinched. The word was a physical blow. He will have his men take you to a quiet place, Kenji continued, his voice terrifyingly calm, as if discussing the weather. It will be quick. I will request that. That is my mercy. That is your end. The world tilted. The beautiful, serene room felt like it was spinning. This was the reality. The cold, hard end. Or, he said, his voice dropping even lower, a velvet-covered threat. Or, I breathed, my life hanging on his next word. Or, you can stay. Here. I stared at him. Stay? I scoffed, a broken, hysterical sound bubbling in my throat. Stay as what? Your prisoner? Your pet? The doll you finally get to break? As mine, he growled, the word a low, possessive vibration that shook me to my core. He didn't touch me, but I felt it like a brand. As the woman I am protecting. As the only thing in this world I will not see harmed. It was too much. The terror, the confusion, the insane, twisted logic of it. My 10 years of iron control, the mask of Hina, it all crumbled. Why? I screamed, the word tearing from my throat raw and agonizing. Why are you doing this? You knew. You've known. You knew who I was. You knew I came to destroy you, and you played with me. You let me. Why save me? Why not just kill me yourself? It's what you do. You're the Oni. You crushed my father. You killed him. Why don't you just finish it? I was sobbing, my fists balled in my lap, my body shaking with the force of my own broken rage. He watched me. He didn't move. He let my screams, my accusations, my pain, echo in the perfect, silent room. And then he did the one thing I could never have imagined. Kenji, the Oni Tanaka, the heir to the Tanaka-gumi, the monster, the man who had laughed as he'd held me captive. He dropped to his knees, not crouched, kneeled. He was on the tatami, his dark blue yukata pooling around him. The man who ruled the city, the god in the glass tower, was kneeling before me. His head was bowed. He was eye level with my waist. Because, he said, and his voice was not the voice of the Oni. It was a raw, broken human sound I had never heard before. I am the man who destroyed your life. I stopped breathing. He looked up. His eyes were... I had no words for what was in his eyes. The arrogance, the cruelty, the playfulness. It was all gone. There was only a vast, dark, empty ocean of guilt. I was 17, he whispered, his voice cracking. I was a bored, arrogant child, trying to prove to my father I was a man. Your father. He was just a name on a file. A test. He shook his head, a violent, self-loathing gesture. I never even looked at what I had done. It was just business. A victory. I became the Oni, and I never looked back. He looked at me, and his gaze was a plea. Until I saw your eyes in that club. That shadow. I knew it. I recognized it. It was mine. He was... I deserve your hatred, Hana, he said, his voice a rasp. I deserve whatever vengeance you have planned. I deserve to be ruined by your hand. I deserve all of it. He took a shuddering breath. But I'll be damned. His voice suddenly turned to steel, to the Oni I knew. If I let anyone else touch you. Not my father. Not the Sasaki-gumi. Not the police. No one. He reached out. His hand, large and scarred, stopped an inch from my knee. It was trembling. Ruining me, he said, his voice raw, a promise, is your right. I will not stop you. I will give you the knife. But saving me, that might be your destiny. I will spend the rest of my life. He choked on the word. Attening. For what I did. He finally looked me full in the face, his eyes burning with a terrifying, desperate, unholy light. But I will not let you go. I can't. My hatred, my guiding star, the one true thing I had left. It didn't just shatter. It evaporated. It was gone. It wasn't replaced by love. It wasn't replaced by forgiveness. It was replaced by him. By this terrible, profound, inescapable bond. My enemy, my monster, the architect of my ruin, had just kneeled at my feet and chained himself to my soul. He had given me the ultimate power, his guilt, his life, while simultaneously taking all of mine. The choice he offered was a lie. My choice was gone. I was staring at the most powerful man in Tokyo, kneeling on my floor, and I had absolutely no idea what to do.
Chapter 10. Kenji. The air in the zashiki was too cold and too hot all at once. Too cold with the chilling, ancient disapproval of the elders. Too hot with the suppressed rage of my father. I stood on the polished wood floor, a lone figure in my newly changed dark gray suit, facing the traditional war council. The men seated on the tatami were the oyabun and 3 of the most powerful kobun, the old guard. They sat like gargoyles, their faces unmoving, their judgment absolute. My father, the head of the Tanaka-gumi, did not look at me. He stared, instead, at a point somewhere over my shoulder, his silence heavier than any reprimand. He was a man carved from unforgiving iron, and I was, to him, a costly, careless mistake. "You show a great lack of respect, Kenji," Elder Sato finally said, his voice a dry, papery rasp. Sato was the gatekeeper of tradition, a man who believed the most dangerous weapon was an insult. "Respect, Sato-san," I replied, my voice calm, flat, but carrying the weight of the oni, "is earned through results, not rituals." Sato's lip curled. The other elders shifted slightly. They were men of ritual. I was a man of blood and balance sheets. "Results," my father finally spoke, his voice cracking like a whip. "You call this a result? The Metropolitan Police are sweeping 3 wards. We have arrests. We have surveillance. We have the Sasaki-gumi calling for an organized meeting, a clear challenge, and all because of an anonymous tip involving a customs official you should have had in your pocket." He slammed his hand on the floor. It was the only uncontrolled movement I'd seen him make in years. "You have brought a disaster of exposure to the family. And you claim credit for this chaos?" This was the moment. The knife edge. I had to sell the lie, not just to them, but to my father. He wouldn't believe a simple lie. He would believe a ruthless, brilliant strategy. "With respect, Oyabun," I said, bowing low but holding my spine straight. It was not chaos. It was a surgical strike. I looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. "For 6 months we have been bleeding. The supply lines, the debt calls, the information leaking to Sasaki. Someone on the inside was feeding them every move. I suspected the customs official. I knew he was on Sasaki's payroll, but I also suspected the mole was higher." I paused, letting the silence draw tight. The shipment was bait. I let it be known, through carefully placed channels, that the entire run was being moved. The real purpose of the shipment was not the merchandise. It was to see who moved against me first. "Sasaki moved," Elder Sato scoffed. "Sasaki moved stupidly," I corrected. "But the police? They moved with too much precision. They arrested Sasaki's men, yes, but they also arrested the customs official. Why? Because the real traitor, the man who was leaking the information to Sasaki, thought I was about to bust his handler. He panicked. He tipped off the Metropolitan Police, thinking he could set up Sasaki, make it look like a rival operation, and hide his own hand. I straightened to my full height, my voice gaining strength, taking on the commanding roar of the Oni. He didn't know he was exposing himself to the police and confirming my suspicions. I lost a shipment. I saved the family from a serpent nesting in our own walls. I let the logic sink in. It was impeccable. It was cold. It was terrifying. And it was exactly the kind of move the Oni would make. The elders looked at each other. They nodded, slowly. The calculation in their eyes shifted from disapproval to reluctant awe. They loved the bloodless strategy. But my father, he knew me too well. He saw the gleam in my eye. He knew I was lying, not about the result, but about the intent. He knew I had played with fate. And the source of this anonymous tip, he demanded, his eyes narrowing to slits. The police have caused untold noise. They demand blood. They demand the head of the informant who brought this heat upon us. Here was the price. The final defense. Hana. There is no informant, Oyabun, I said, my voice heavy with conviction. There is only me. The room went silent again. I acted alone, I stated. I managed the entire operation. The information came directly from me. It was placed through a disposable channel, one that cannot be traced. I looked directly at the man who had given me the name Oni. The one responsible for the chaos is me. I bowed, deep and low. I accept full responsibility, and I will pay the shame. Sato looked triumphant. Then the sacrifice must be proportional. You have caused the family great loss of face and great financial damage. You have disrupted the balance. Name it, I said, without looking up. You will formally apologize to the neutral clans for the disruption in trade, and you will cede control of the Kawasaki Port District permanently to the Saito-gumi. The transaction must be completed before dawn. Kawasaki. My prize. My ticket to full succession. It was worth billions. It was the hub of my legitimate operation and the foundation of my power. I had destroyed a family over a textile company. Now I was giving up an empire for a single, terrified woman. Agreed, I said. It was instantaneous. Final. I straightened. The matter is settled. I will complete the transaction by sunrise. My father did not argue. He simply stared at me, his eyes filled with a deep, bottomless contempt. Contempt for the son who had just ruined his own position. Contempt for the son who was weak enough to pay such a price for a secret. 40 minutes later, I was back in the Lexus. The city was quiet. Tatsu was driving. The air in the car was thick with unspoken tension. The papers are drawn up, sir, Tatsu finally said, his voice flat. Kawasaki is gone. It's a bloodletting. The Saito-gumi will absorb everything. I looked out the window. It is a business loss, Tatsu. Nothing more. Sir? Tatsu pulled the car over onto a deserted overpass, overlooking the sprawling lights of the industrial district. He turned, his gaze hard. I'm your friend, not your servant. You gave up a quarter of your power for her. Don't be a fool, I snapped. It was for the organization. The traitor was higher up than we thought. He needed to be exposed. The police gave us the cover. You could have used that truth to destroy Sasaki, claimed the trader's assets, and kept Kawasaki. Tatsu countered, his voice low, intense. You chose to protect the girl. You chose to protect her from the elders, from the police, from your father. You took the blame and the debt onto yourself. He was right. He saw the truth, the raw, brutal, unforgivable truth. I made a choice, Tatsu, I admitted, staring out at the distant glow of the city lights. My fingers tightened on the leather of the seat. 10 years ago, I destroyed something perfect for no reason. For an insult. For the sake of a name. I crushed a life I didn't even see. I turned to him, the weariness of the last few days settling on me like a shroud. She is the debt, Tatsu. She is the guilt I have been carrying. I thought I was bored. I was just empty. She is the only thing that has made me feel anything since I was 17. I leaned back, closing my eyes. I spent my whole life building an empire on fear. She's the first thing I've ever wanted to build on something else. On truth. On atonement. Tatsu stared at me for a long moment. Then he sighed, a sound of profound resignation. Then let us hope your atonement is worth the price of an empire, Tanaka-sama. We arrived back at the compound just as the first sliver of false dawn was stretching across the sky. The old stone walls looked grim, silent, and unforgiving. I walked the ancient corridors alone. My feet made no sound on the polished wood. The silence of the house was absolute. I walked toward the prison room, the place where the only woman who had ever mattered was waiting. I slid the screen open. She was asleep. Curled up on the tatami, still in the blood-red dress, one hand tucked beneath her bruised cheek, the black pearls a dark chain on her throat. She looked small, vulnerable, a broken bird, finally safe inside the falcon's nest. The guilt was a physical pain in my chest. I had done this to her. I had created this broken, desperate beauty. I sat on the tatami, placing myself between her and the window. I didn't touch her. I just watched her breathe. Her eyes flickered open. They were still clouded with sleep, then terror, then recognition. She scrambled back, hitting the silk screen, pulling the heavy velvet yukata I had left for her around her shoulders. She was instantly alert, a hunted thing. You're back, she whispered. Did your father agree? I nodded, the movement stiff. I reached up and touched the fresh cut on my jaw. It was throbbing, a reminder of the fight I'd had to wage, not with the elders, but with myself. It's done, I said, my voice raw with exhaustion and triumph. You're safe. My father, no one can touch you. You are under the protection of the Oni. You are mine. I looked at the black pearls around her neck. They were the symbol of my theft. I paid the price, I told her, my eyes holding hers. I paid it in full. I lost my most valuable asset. My father disowned me for the sacrifice. But you are safe. I lifted my hand. It was trembling, just slightly. I held it out to her. It was scarred, powerful, and now, strangely, begging. The choice I gave you before was a lie, Hana, I said, using her real name, tasting the forbidden sweetness of it. It was the choice of a monster. This is the real one. Stay. Not as my prisoner. Not as a doll. Stay as my equal. As the ghost of my past. As the debt I owe. My gaze dropped, finding the exact center of her chest, the location of the heart I had helped shatter. Ruining me is still your right. You have the full truth now. But if you want to rebuild what I broke, if you want to help me find a path out of this darkness—" I looked up again, my eyes burning. "Then stay. Help me rebuild what I broke. Start here. With me."
Chapter 11. Hana. I sat on the tatami, the plush velvet yukata pulled tight around me, and stared at the empty space where Kenji Tanaka had just been kneeling. The moment he had left, the silence of the room, which had been serene, became deafening. The single spotlight illuminating the dry garden outside now felt like a spotlight on my soul, mercilessly exposing the wreckage. He was gone. But his confession lingered, a toxic, potent gas that filled my lungs and replaced the air. He hadn't offered me mercy. He hadn't offered me love. He had offered me atonement. I will spend the rest of my life atoning for what I did. Help me rebuild what I broke. Start here. With me. I looked down at my hands. They were no longer trembling. They were steady. The hatred, the guiding star that had steered me through 10 years of poverty and fear, was gone. It hadn't been defeated by his power, or even by his protection. It had been shattered by his guilt. He had taken the crushing, unbearable weight of my trauma and, in a single, desperate, reckless moment, claimed it as his own. He hadn't just saved my life. He had redeemed the meaning of my suffering. He made it matter, not as an empty act of arbitrary cruelty, but as the foundation of his own agonizing redemption. My vengeance felt small, petty. What good was destroying him now, when he had already destroyed himself for me? If I pushed the knife into his heart, it wouldn't feel like justice. It would feel like an execution, a cheap, final, unsatisfying theft. I stood up. I began to pace the perfect, fragrant tatami. I was no longer crying. The sorrow was gone, replaced by a cold, frightening clarity. The man had faced down his father, faced down the elders, and paid the price of an empire, Kawasaki, to protect me. He had taken the blame for the chaos I caused, saving the organization he was meant to inherit, purely to secure my survival. He didn't just want me. He needed me to be safe to prove that he was not the monster his father created. He was offering me a gilded cage, yes, but it was a cage he was also willing to enter with me. He was offering a life of protection, of comfort, of silent penance. He was offering me the power to ruin him, a passive, slow destruction by guilt and presence. And that was where I found the new, terrifying core of my resolve. I didn't want a passive destruction. I didn't want a silent penance. I didn't want to be a beautiful, well-fed ghost in a corner of his compound, forever watching him bleed from a wound I had inflicted. I wanted more. I walked to the shoji screen and yanked it open. The guards outside, 2 stone-faced men in dark suits, didn't flinch, but their eyes widened slightly at the blatant breach of protocol. I didn't care. "I need to speak to Kenji-san," I commanded. My voice was no longer Hina's silk, and certainly not the frightened girl's shriek. It was low, steady, and carried the unshakable certainty of a woman who had just realized her true value. It was over an hour before he returned. The sun had broken the horizon, casting the compound in a harsh, cold light. He looked worse than before. The suit was wrinkled, his jaw bruise looked deeper, and his eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion and the endless tension of the night. He was carrying the weariness of a 1,000-ton debt. He walked into the room, not with the fluid grace of the Oni, but with the heavy, exhausted gait of a man who had just paid the price for a piece of his soul. He stopped in the center of the room. He didn't sit. He looked at me, waiting. I was standing by the glass wall, the faint golden light of dawn hitting the black pearls at my throat, turning them into cold, hard jewels of reckoning. "I need your answer, Hana," he said. his voice flat with depletion. I cannot hold off the elders forever, and the police are still searching. I looked at him. At the man who had crippled his own power structure for me. The man I was meant to hate. "You're a fool, Kenji Tanaka," I said. The words weren't hateful. They were simply a statement of fact. He didn't flinch. "I am." "What is your choice?" "Your atonement," I began, walking toward him, my bare feet silent on the tatami. "You bowed to the elders. You gave up Kawasaki. You accepted the shame." I stopped inches from him. I had to tilt my head back to look into his eyes. "That's not atonement, Kenji? That's weakness. That's punishment. You think that's enough to pay the debt of a man's life, the destruction of his family, the shame of his daughter." He stood absolutely still, his massive frame radiating heat and tension. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the raw honesty in my voice stopped him. "No," he whispered, "it is not." "Then why did you do it?" "Because," he said, his gaze dropping to my lips, then snapping back to my eyes. "It was the only way to keep you alive. And I cannot live without seeing you, Hana, even if you hate me." The vulnerability of his confession was a terrible, beautiful thing. And I used it. "Then your sacrifice is incomplete," I declared. My voice was suddenly hard, laced with the new, terrifying ambition that had replaced my hatred. "You want to pay the debt? You want to atone for what you broke?" I lifted my hand. I didn't touch him. I pointed instead to the pearls. "You didn't just destroy my father, Kenshin Inoue. You destroyed a business, a legitimate company, the legacy of an honest man." His breath hitched. He finally understood. "Your offering is a cage, Kenji. It is security. It is comfortable, silent death. But I am not here for death. I am here for life. I am here to rebuild. I am here for my father's name." I met his gaze, my eyes blazing with the same furious, terrifying intensity he had shown me in the club. "You want to fix the past? Then build a new future, a legitimate one, with me." I took a step closer, crowding his space. "I don't want a protected room in your fortress. I want my company back. I want my name restored. I want you to use the power you have, the legitimate power you sacrificed Kawasaki for, and build something real, something that stands in the light." He was breathing hard, the exhaustion in his eyes slowly being replaced by something wild, feral, and utterly captivated. You want a business," he managed, his voice hoarse. "You want a legitimate partnership." "I want the debt paid, Kenji," I corrected. "I want to take all the blood and shame you carry and turn it into steel. You need a path to legitimacy to save your future. I need a path to my past to save my soul. Our interests are aligned." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a dangerous, intimate murmur. "Your atonement is not to ruin yourself for me. Your atonement is to build an empire with me." The air between us crackled, thick with promise. This was the true nature of our chemistry. Two broken people, bonded by violence, finding salvation in a common, impossible goal. He reached out. His hand brushed the bruise on his jaw, the one he'd gotten protecting my secret. He looked from the bruise to my eyes, to the pearls. "A business," he repeated, a slow, terrifying smile spreading across his face. "A legitimate one, a business founded on the death of another man's work. You are brilliant, Hana Inoue. Absolutely magnificent." He chuckled, a dark, low sound of pure appreciation. "And dangerous. The most dangerous woman in my city." He reached out, his hands covering my shoulders, his grip a statement of eternal possession. "I accept your terms," he said. "Every last one of them. The debt is paid when you say it is paid. The company is yours. The work is ours." I wasn't done. The final piece of the contract. "One more thing, Kenji-san. I said, my chin lifting in a gesture of pure, unadulterated command. I will not be your wife, hiding in a compound. I will not be your kept woman. I will not be your equal, hidden in a room. I held his gaze, my own eyes challenging the dark, stormy sea of his. I will be your queen, I declared, standing by your side. In the light, the one woman who cannot be touched because she is a part of the Oni. Do you understand? I am not a ghost. I am a warrior. His eyes widened slightly, the challenge accepted. The Oni was faced with a new, beautiful demon, his equal in ambition and fire. Yes, he growled. Yes, I understand. He pulled me to him, not gently. With a brutal, desperate force that stole the air from my lungs, the distance that had separated us for days, for a decade, was gone. His mouth crushed down on mine. It was not a kiss of romance. It was a contract, sealed in fire. A kiss of possession, of war, of savage devotion. His lips were hot, demanding, tasting of the shame and the promise he'd just made. His hands left my shoulders, sweeping down my back, pulling me impossibly tighter against his hard, powerful body. My fingers instinctively clawed at his shirt, holding on to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that was suddenly spinning free of all rules. The hatred was gone. It was replaced by this, a complex, terrifying, intoxicating love that was as dark and dangerous as the man himself. He lifted his head, breaking the contact, but only to look down at me, his eyes burning. Done, he breathed, his voice ragged with passion and exhaustion. I am yours. You are mine. Now what do you need first, Queen? I looked at him, feeling the ghost of Kenshin Inoue finally definitively rest. I need you to show me the books for the new shipping conglomerate. We start by building something he cannot touch.
Chapter 12. Kenji. The nameplate was simple, minimalist, cut from a single sheet of brushed steel. It read, Inoue Tanaka Holdings. I sat in the observation lounge, 2 fingers of cold water in a tumbler, watching my wife work. 1 year. A year of bloodless, legitimate war. A year of endless grinding work that was paradoxically more exhausting and more exhilarating than anything I'd ever done while running the Yakuza. There were no swords here, only contracts. No gunfire, only closing arguments. And she, Hana, my queen, was the general. She stood at the head of the immense mahogany boardroom table, facing a delegation from the Singaporean Shipping Consortium. A tough, seasoned group of men and women who thought they were negotiating with a well-funded, ambitious newcomer. They thought the man sitting in the observation lounge, me, was the silent power. They were half right. I was the power. But she was the conductor. Hana was wearing a suit of deep charcoal gray, sharp and utterly unforgiving, a severe contrast to the red silk and fragile kimonos of the past. The black pearls were gone, replaced by a simple, elegant silver pendant. A gift from me, a clean slate. She hadn't asked for the ring I'd offered her. She'd asked for a clean ledger. She was devastating. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She simply presented the facts, the logistics reports, the revenue projections, the detailed breakdown of the supply chain she had spent the last year meticulously cleaning and fortifying. She moved like a surgeon, precise, necessary, and utterly focused on the cut. Your current throughput is limited by antiquated internal controls, she explained, her voice ringing clear, devoid of the hostess's purr. We are offering you efficiency, a 20% increase in load capacity within 6 months, secured by the established network of the former Tanaka logistics routes. The only thing we ask in return is exclusivity in the Eastern Sea. She was speaking of my old roots, the arteries that once moved illicit cargo, now scrubbing clean and repurposed for global commerce. She wasn't just building a company. She was building a legitimate, unassailable fortress that stood on the ruins of my empire. I watched the leader of the delegation, a formidable Chinese woman, slowly nod. Hana had backed her into a corner with logic and data, using the ruthless calculus I'd taught her, polished with the integrity of her own broken past. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. It wasn't desire, though that was always present. A constant, heavy hum beneath my skin. It was pride. A terrifying, all-consuming pride that she was mine, and that I was the reason she had found this power. Tatsu, who now sat in an adjacent office running all of our security and legitimate transport, had asked me a year ago if my atonement was worth the price of an empire. I had given up the Kawasaki port, the key to my succession, and incurred the eternal shame of my father. I'd lost a quarter of my power. But what I had gained was incalculable. I had gained a purpose. I had gained her. I was still the Oni. The ruthlessness was still there, the cold calculation, the ability to make devastating, life-ending decisions. But now, the sharpest edge of the blade was pointed outward, protecting the fragile, growing flower of legitimacy. I was the mountain, and she was the relentless wind carving it into something beautiful. I was the shield that allowed her to stand in the light. The deal is closed, I realized, as Hana inclined her head, accepting the final papers. The room erupted in polite applause. She had won. Again. She gathered her notes, her movements economical, betraying no satisfaction. But I knew better. I saw the faint, almost invisible flush high on her cheekbones. The warrior was triumphant. She turned toward the observation lounge. She hadn't looked at me once during the entire 2-hour meeting, yet I knew she had been aware of my presence every single second. Her eyes met mine. They were no longer filled with the endless sorrow of the hostess or the furious hatred of the girl. They were sharp, clear, and challenging. We did it. She gave me a slight, proprietary smile. Not the manufactured one, but the true, quiet one I owned. It was a promise of payment, a reward for the general who had held the line. I pushed off the wall. The meeting was over. The day, however, was just beginning.
Hana. The paper in my hand felt deceptively light. It was the master contract for the new Southeast Asia shipping routes, secured using the very infrastructure Kenji had built with Yakuza funds. It was clean. It was legal. It was a multi-billion-yen empire built on the bedrock of my father's ruin. A business founded on the death of another man's work. Kenji's words, a year ago. I walked out of the boardroom, the congratulations of the Singaporean delegation fading behind me. I didn't feel relief. I felt a cold, deep, unshakable satisfaction. The hatred was gone. It hadn't faded. It had been used up, refined, and forged into this Naoe Tanaka holdings. The memory of my father was no longer a choking grief. It was the foundation of the strongest, most ethical business in the entire region. The debt was paid. I walked into the observation lounge. Kenji was waiting for me. He was in a charcoal suit, but he was still the Oni. The power he radiated hadn't lessened. It had simply been channeled. He looked like what he was, a warlord disguised as a CEO, a beautiful, devastating force of nature contained within Italian tailoring. He watched me approach, his dark eyes intense, possessive, and laced with that familiar, sizzling heat that was the only remnant of our original collision. I stopped in front of him. "Perfect," he murmured, his voice low. He didn't ask how the meeting went. He didn't need to. "A flawless kill." "We did it," I confirmed, my voice steady. "We own the eastern routes." And not a single bribe or threat was used. "Only brilliance," he corrected. He reached out, his hand, the same hand that had once signed the order of my ruin, gently brushing the silver pendant at my throat. "You are terrifying in that room, Hana-chan. I've never been more proud, or more aroused." The honesty, the casual violence of his desire, still stunned me sometimes. But it was his honesty. The brutal, necessary truth of the Oni. I leaned in, resting my forehead against his chest. I could feel the powerful, steady rhythm of his heart beneath the fine fabric. This was my sanctuary. This was my protection. It was exhausting, I admitted. The mask could drop here, only here. Good. "You deserve exhaustion." He pulled me tighter against him, his arms strong, possessive. "The price of being queen is never getting to rest." "And what about the king?" I pulled back, a small, genuine smile curving my lips. "I saw you hiding back here." Avoiding the small talk. "I hold the ground, Kuun," he growled. "You win the war. It's a system that works." I chuckled, reaching up to smooth the stubborn lock of hair that always fell across his forehead. "It works because you are terrified of discussing future growth projections with Mrs. Lee." He caught my hand, kissing the palm deeply. "I am terrified of no one," he contradicted, his eyes gleaming, "except perhaps the sight of your empty desk." He kept my hand, pulling me toward the private elevator. "Come, Tatsu sent a message 2 hours ago." "Oh? What is the crisis?" "The crisis," he said, pulling me into the empty elevator, the doors sliding shut with a soft, final clunk, "is that he just called the house and informed me that my 2-year-old twin nephews have successfully convinced him to put on a tiara and play Yakuza princesses in the dry garden. He's begging for reinforcement." I threw my head back and laughed, a full, rich sound that had been absent from my life for 10 long years. Poor Tatsu. He gets no breaks, and they aren't Yakuza princesses, Kenji. They're corporate overlords. He pressed the button for the underground garage. The elevator began its silent descent. He didn't release my hand. He turned me to face him, his eyes dark, intense, burning with the promise he'd made a year ago. He reached out and cupped my cheek, his thumb gently wiping away a stray smudge of ink I hadn't realized was there. "I promised you atonement," he said, his voice a low, sacred vow. "I promised you a choice. I gave you the knife." He brought his mouth to mine. This time, the kiss was neither savage nor a contract. It was complex. It was a soft, deep devotion layered over a fierce, burning possession. It tasted of single malt, of triumph, and of a future finally, irrevocably earned. "You chose to save me instead," he whispered against my lips. "I will spend the rest of my life thanking you for the privilege." I wrapped my arms around his neck, holding on to the dark, brilliant storm that was my life, my enemy, my salvation. "Then let's go home, Oni-san," I murmured. "I want to see Tatsu in a tiara." He was the man who had broken her. But together they had built an unbreakable house of rising suns from the pieces, their love as absolute and dangerous as the empire they now controlled.